The doors at the back of the auction hall slam open, and every head in the room turns before I do. My hand is already closing around the gavel. 62 floors above Seoul, glass walls floor to ceiling, the whole city glittering below like it's made of broken glass, and on the screen behind me, 6 words about to end a 100-year-old company, Mererani Direct, now controls global supply. In 30 seconds, I am going to bring this gavel down and bankrupt the family that humiliated me in front of 400 wedding guests, a goat roasting on a spit, and a pastor who waited 90 minutes for a groom who never came. My name is Zuhura Mwakalinga. Everyone calls me Zuri. 5 years ago, I was a mining engineer's daughter standing at the front of a church in Arusha, Tanzania, wearing my mother's wedding kanga and waiting for a Korean man named Tae-min Kang to marry me. He never walked through those doors. For 5 years, I told myself I had stopped hearing that particular silence, 91 minutes of a church organ playing the same 3 notes on loop, because the organist did not know what else to do with her hands. I was wrong. I hear it every time a room goes quiet around me, and the auction floor tonight had gone exactly that quiet the second those back doors slammed open and Tae-min Kang walked through. Tonight, I am standing in his mother's auction house, about to take everything that family has ever built, and the only thing standing between me and the gavel coming down is the man himself, closing the distance across the floor, looking at me like 5 years never happened at all. "Zuri," he says, and the whole room goes quiet. "Don't do this." I smile, because I have practiced this smile in the mirror for 5 years.
Tae-min, you're 400 guests and 90 minutes too late to tell me what to do.
Let me take you back, because you need to understand exactly how far I have come to stand in this room. 5 years ago, my father owned a small tanzanite mine outside Mererani, the only place on earth where that blue stone is found, rarer than diamonds, married to one mountain on the whole planet. We were not rich. We were proud. My father, Baba Juma, had spent 30 years pulling that stone out of red dirt with his own hands, and he dreamed of the day a Mwakalinga mine would sit on the same shelves as the biggest jewelry houses in the world. That dream had a name, Kang Jewelry House, Seoul's oldest and most respected luxury gem company, run for 2 generations by a woman named Hye-sook Kang. A chairwoman so feared in the gem trade that buyers called her the Iron Orchid behind her back. Her son came to Mererani to inspect our mine for a supply contract that would change my father's life. His name was Tae-min. He had soft eyes for a man raised inside that kind of cold, and he asked me questions nobody from Seoul had ever bothered asking a miner's daughter. What the red dust smelled like after rain, why we sang while we sorted stone, what my name meant. Zuhura means flower that blooms in difficult ground. He told me that was the most beautiful name he had ever heard, and 3 months later, in front of my whole village, he got down on one knee in the dirt outside my father's sorting shed and asked me to marry him. Tanzanite changes color depending on how the light hits it, blue as the sky right before a storm from one angle, violet as a bruise from another, and looking back, I think that should have told me something about the difference between how a thing looks and what it actually is. I said yes before he even finished asking. I had no idea that kneeling in that red dirt was the easy part, and that the hard part would start the day he didn't show up at all. I should tell you, because this part matters, his mother did not come to that proposal. She sent a lawyer instead, with a contract for my father to sign, 50 pages long, written in English my father could not read. That he signed anyway because he trusted his daughter's fiancé. I did not read it either. I was 24 years old and in love. That was my first mistake. I would give anything to go back and read every page of that contract myself. I didn't. And that single decision is the reason 400 people would watch me get humiliated 3 months later. The night before the wedding, my best friend Amina sat on the edge of my bed, braiding my hair the way she had since we were 12 years old, and she said the thing I should have listened to harder. You know you can still read that contract before tomorrow, right? Lawyers do not stop being lawyers just because love is in the room. I laughed her off. I told her some things you choose to believe in instead of investigate, and love was one of them. She kept braiding in silence after that, the kind of silence only your oldest friend knows how to fill with worry instead of words. Quick favor before we get to the wedding itself. If you haven't already, tap that like button right now. It genuinely helps this story reach more people who need to hear how it ends. The wedding was set for a Saturday in June, in the church my mother was baptized in, with my father's whole mining crew invited and 2 goats roasting since dawn. 400 people came. Some of them walked 6 hours from villages further up the mountain because a Mwakalinga girl marrying a Korean heir was the biggest thing to happen in Mererani in a generation. I stood at the front of that church for 90 minutes in my mother's kanga, restitched into a wedding dress by the only seamstress in town good enough to touch silk. I watched the door. I watched my father's face go from proud to confused to something I had never seen on him before, fear. At minute 981, Tae-min's assistant walked in alone, in a black suit, sweating through his collar, and handed my father an envelope instead of a groom. Inside was a letter, 4 sentences. I have it memorized. I will not give you all 4. But the one that mattered most said this: my mother has made it clear that this marriage cannot continue, and I have decided she is right. I did not cry in that church. I want you to know that. I smiled, the way you smile when 400 people are watching you decide who you are going to be for the rest of your life, walked to the front of the room myself, and told everyone the goats were getting cold, so we might as well eat. We ate. I did not cry until 3 a.m, alone, still in my mother's kanga, sitting on the floor of my childhood bedroom while my father sat outside the door all night because he didn't know what else to do for me. Amina showed up at dawn the next morning without me calling her, the way she always did when she somehow knew. She did not say I told you so, even though she had every right to. She just sat with me on the floor of that same childhood bedroom, still smelling like roasted goat and candle wax, and said, okay, today we grieve. Tomorrow we figure out what kind of woman you're going to become because of this, not in spite of it. I did not know yet how long tomorrow would actually take. I just knew I was not facing it alone. 2 weeks later, Kang Jewelry House canceled the supply contract entirely. Lawyers said a clause my father signed and never understood gave them the right to walk away with no penalty if, and I am quoting this exactly, the personal relationship underlying the agreement is dissolved. My engagement had been collateral the whole time. When it ended, so did my father's deal. 6 weeks after that, my father had a stroke at his sorting table, the doctor said from stress, and the bank started calling about a mine that could no longer pay its loans without that contract. If you are still here with me, if a story about a woman getting left at the altar by a man whose family destroyed her father's life is the kind of thing you want to keep watching, hit subscribe right now, because what I did next took me 5 years, and I promise you it is worth staying for. I am not going to pretend I rebuilt myself gracefully. For the first year, I was furious in a way that scared the people who loved me. I stopped going to church. I stopped wearing kanga. I cut my hair short because I could not look at my reflection in a wedding dress one more time, even in my own memory. But anger is just grief that learned how to stand up, and eventually mine learned how to walk. My father could not run the mine after his stroke, so I did. I taught myself everything Kang Jewelry House's 50-page contract had assumed I would never understand: gem grading, export law, international finance, the difference between a fair contract and a trap dressed up in nice paper. I flew to Antwerp on a loan I almost didn't get because the bank manager looked at me like a mining family's daughter had no business asking for capital. He actually said it out loud, sliding my loan application back across his desk without reading past the first page. Miss Mwakalinga, with respect, gemstone export financing usually goes to companies with an established track record. Not a mine that lost its only major contract 2 years ago. I did not argue with him. I opened my laptop instead and showed him 18 months of export documentation I had built from nothing. Buyer contacts I had cultivated one cold email at a time, grading certifications I had earned by sitting in a classroom in Bangkok at 26 years old next to students half my age. I am not asking you to bet on a mine that lost a contract, I told him. I am asking you to bet on the only person in this room who has read every page of every contract she has ever signed since. He approved the loan, smaller than I asked for, but enough to build the first real shipment of Mererani direct stone that left Tanzania without anyone else's name on the paperwork. I flew to Bangkok, to Mumbai, to New York, sitting across from buyers twice my age who assumed I was someone's assistant until I opened my mouth. I built Mererani direct, stone by stone, contract by contract, refusing every single time to sign anything I had not read myself, twice, out loud, to my own lawyer. Within 3 years, we were selling tanzanite straight to luxury houses with no middleman taking a cut off my father's mountain. I still remember the day a buyer named Mr. Suzuki, who had bought from Kang Jewelry House for 15 years, called me directly instead of going through Seoul. Your stones come with paperwork I can actually trace to a specific shaft, a specific date, a specific family. He said, Kang Jewelry House gives me a certificate with a logo on it. You give me a person I can call if something doesn't look right. In this business, that is worth more than the logo. I did not gloat. I just thanked him, hung up the phone, and walked outside my new office to tell my father over a crackling video call, because some wins you cannot celebrate alone. You have to hand them straight to the person who survived the loss with you. Within 4 years, 2 of Kang Jewelry House's oldest clients quietly moved their contracts to me instead, because I paid Tanzanian miners fairly, and Kang Jewelry House, it turned out, had spent a decade doing the opposite. I did not chase revenge. I want to be honest about that. I chased survival first, then I chased respect, and somewhere in year 4 I noticed that respect and revenge had started looking at me with the same face. So when an industry contact told me Kang Jewelry House was quietly drowning, over-leveraged from an arranged marriage deal for Tae-min that collapsed 2 years ago, desperate for a new tanzanite supplier before their biggest clients walked. I did not hesitate. I flew to Seoul myself. I'll tell you exactly how I got back into that room in a second, but first, if you're still with me, drop a comment with just the word Mererani so I can see how many of you are following along. It genuinely makes my day to scroll through those. Which brings us back to that auction floor, 62 stories above Seoul, gavel in my hand. And Tae-min Kang walking toward me like the last 5 years are a door he can just open. You look well, he says, which is the most Korean businessman thing a heartbroken man could possibly say to the woman whose wedding he abandoned. I look like I built an empire out of the wreckage you left behind, I say. Let's not pretend this is a reunion, Tae-min. This is a liquidation. His jaw tightens, the same way it used to when his mother called while we were eating dinner in Mererani, except now there's no dinner. Just 300 buyers watching us from their seats, phones already filming. My mother sent that letter, he says, low, fast, like the words had been waiting 5 years to get out.
My mother sent that letter. I didn't write it. I didn't even see it before your father read it. By the time I landed in Arusha to stop it myself, the wedding was already over.
Laugh, and it sounds uglier than I mean it to. You landed. After. How generous. She told me if I married you, she'd pull every contract your father had, not just ours. Every distributor in the region would follow her lead out of fear. Your whole village would lose work because of me. I believed she'd do it. I still believe she'd do it. So I let her think she'd won. She didn't just think it, I say. She did it anyway. 2 weeks later. You traded my father's wedding day for nothing, Tae-min. Less than nothing. You handed her a knife, and she used it twice. For a second, just a second, something cracks across his face that looks less like a chairman's son and more like the boy who knelt in red dirt outside a sorting shed. Then the moment closes, and the businessman comes back. Then let me help you stop her properly, he says, not with a gavel in a public auction house, with the truth. Before I tell you what he showed me in that back office, the contracts, the wire transfers, the second set of books his own mother had been keeping for a decade, I need you to do something for me. If you've ever rebuilt yourself from something that broke you in public, drop a comment below and tell me what you built. I read every single one, and honestly. On nights when this story still feels heavy to tell, those comments are what get me back to the desk to tell the next one. Because what Tae-min showed me changed the entire shape of my revenge. He led me to a private office behind the auction floor, glass walls, the kind of room built so the chairwoman could watch her empire from above without anyone watching her back. On the desk sat 2 ledgers. One was the official Kang jewelry house accounting his auditors signed off on every year. The other was handwritten, his mother's own hand, tracking a decade of underpaid Tanzanian contracts. Mines paid 40% of market value, while invoices to European buyers reflected full price, my father's mine, among the first 3 on the list. The exact 2 weeks after my wedding circled in red ink with a note in Korean that translated to contract voided, assets secured at minimum cost. She didn't cancel the contract because of us, I said, understanding hitting me slower than it should have. She canceled it because she was already planning to undervalue my father's mine and needed an excuse with no penalty clause. Our engagement wasn't a reason, Tae-min said. It was a tool. The moment it broke, she didn't even have to explain herself to the board. I thought that was the worst part of the story he had to tell me. I was wrong, because that's the exact moment the door opened behind us. Before I could answer, the glass door opened, and Hye-sook Kang walked in, wearing the same composed cruelty I remembered from a dozen video calls during our engagement. The only difference 5 years had made was a little more silver in her hair. Zuri, she said, like she was naming a stone she was about to undervalue. I see you've learned to read contracts. I learned a lot of things, actually, I said. Export law, wire transfer tracing. The difference between 40% and full market value paid to a man who had a stroke at his sorting table because your company stopped paying him fairly 2 weeks after you destroyed his daughter's wedding. For the first time in 5 years, I watched Hye-sook Kang's composure slip, just at the edges, just enough. That ledger is private, she said. It's about to be very public, I said, unless you'd like to renegotiate every undervalued contract on that list, starting with mine, in front of the same buyers currently filming this auction on their phones. Hye-sook turned to her son, and her voice dropped into the register I imagine she used on him his entire childhood. Quiet, certain, expecting obedience like weather expects gravity. Tae-min, escort her out. We will handle the contract irregularities internally, the way this family always has. I watched him stand there, between the mother who built him and the woman he had once knelt for in red dirt, and for a second I genuinely did not know which way 5 years and a 100-year-old company would pull him. No, he said. One word. It landed in that glass office like the gavel I never got to bring down on the auction floor. "I let you write me out of my own choices once," he said to his mother, in a church in Arusha, in front of 400 people who loved her, and I have spent 5 years telling myself it was the only way to protect them. It wasn't protection. It was a cover story for a decade of stealing from the people who made this company rich in the first place. "You will lose everything," Hye-sook said, and for the first time her voice actually shook. "The board, the company, your name in this industry." "I already lost the only thing that mattered," he said 5 years ago, in a church, "because I was a coward who let you hold a knife to people I loved instead of standing in front of them myself." He turned to me, and even after everything, even with 5 years of armor I had built stone by stone around my own heart, something in his face nearly knocked it loose. "I can't undo Arusha," he said, "but I can stand in front of every buyer on that floor right now and tell them the truth about every undervalued contract on my mother's desk, starting with yours. That's not me asking you to forgive me. That's me finally doing what I should have done a long time ago." If you want to know whether he actually went through with it, subscribe right now so you don't miss exactly how this played out. Because what happened on that auction floor next is the part people in the gem trade are still talking about. We walked back onto that auction floor together, and I want you to understand, I did not need him to fix this for me. I had already built the gavel that would bankrupt his company on my own, with my own contracts, my own decade of work. But there is a difference between revenge that destroys and justice that rebuilds, and standing next to the man who once knelt for me. Watching him choose truth over his own family's empire in front of 300 buyers, I understood which one I actually wanted. Amina, who had flown to Seoul with me as Mererani Direct's operations director, and the same girl who once braided my hair the night before a wedding that never happened, squeezed my hand once from the front row. The only reminder I needed that I was not facing this room alone either. Tae-min took the microphone himself. He told them everything: the second ledger, the decade of underpaid Tanzanian contracts, his own mother's handwriting circling my father's mind 2 weeks after a wedding that never happened. Phones turned from recording the auction itself to recording Tae-min instead. Gasps rippling backward through 300 buyers like a stone dropped into still water. Somewhere near the back, a journalist already typing the headline that would run by morning in 3 languages. The room went from murmurs to silence to the particular kind of chaos that happens when 300 wealthy buyers realize the company they trust has been lying to everyone, including them. For 10 years. I did not bring my gavel down to bankrupt Kang Jewelry House that night. I brought it down on something better, a new contract, drafted in English I had read myself, 3 times, out loud, witnessed by every journalist in that room. Mererani Direct as the exclusive, ethical Tanzanite partner for a restructured Kang Jewelry House, full market value. Retroactive payments to every mine on that ledger, my father's mine first. Hye-sook Kang resigned from her own company within the month. The board did not have much choice once the story broke across every gem trade publication in Asia. Tae-min did not take her chair. He told the board he didn't deserve to run a company built on a decade of theft he'd been too afraid to stop sooner. And instead, he asked to run the new ethical sourcing division, the one tracing where every stone actually comes from and making sure the people pulling it out of the ground get paid what it's worth. My father got the news in his hospital bed in Arusha, on a video call, sitting up straighter than he had in 5 years when I told him Mererani Direct Stone would sit on Kang Jewelry House shelves at full value, his name on the contract this time. In writing, he could finally afford a translator to read to him line by line, just so he'd know exactly what he was signing. I will tell you honestly, Tae-min and I did not fall back into each other's arms that night under fireworks. Because that's not how 5 years of betrayal actually heals, no matter what the movies tell you. What we did instead was harder and slower and a great deal more honest. He flew to Mererani 3 months later, not as a chairman's son inspecting a mine, but as the head of an ethical sourcing division, asking my father's permission, in person, in the dirt outside the same sorting shed where he'd once knelt, to sit across a table from me as a business partner first and figure out everything else after. If there was anything left to figure out at all. There was. It just took a different shape than the one we'd planned 5 years earlier. We built a fair trade certification program together, the first of its kind connecting Tanzanian tanzanite mines directly to international buyers with guaranteed minimum pricing. No middleman skimming a fortune off the top, no clause anywhere that made anyone's heart collateral for anyone's contract. We named it after my father's mine, the first one on Hye-sook's old ledger. The first one to get paid what it was actually worth. My father walks with a cane now, slower than he used to, but he walks every morning to the sorting shed to watch the new apprentices we trained, mostly young women from mining families who never thought international buyers would sit across a table from them either. He likes to remind me, usually while drinking his tea too loudly on purpose, that he always told me the ground
itself doesn't care what color you are or what language your contract is written in. It just rewards whoever's willing to keep digging long enough to find what's actually there.
As for Tae-min, we are not engaged. Not yet, not officially, though there is a particular kind of patience that grows between two people who have already survived losing each other once and are in no hurry to get the order of things wrong a second time. He flies to Arusha more often than Seoul's board would probably prefer. I fly to Seoul more often than my own schedule allows. Somewhere in between those two cities, in airports and video calls, and one very long, very honest conversation outside a sorting shed in red dirt, we have started building something neither of our families' contracts ever accounted for, a relationship that belongs to no one but the two of us. If you made it this far with me, through a wedding that never happened, a 5-year rebuild, and a boardroom reckoning 62 stories above Seoul, I want you to know something. Whatever ground you're standing in right now that feels too difficult to bloom in, you are more capable of rebuilding than you think. Like and comment below if any part of this story is your story too, in whatever shape it's taken for you, and subscribe if you want to be here for the next one. Because Mererani is not the only mountain with a story buried in it, and I have a feeling you and I are just getting started. This is Zuri Mwakalinga, and that flower bloomed exactly where they said it never would.